I can't hear anything.
Unmuted.
Okay,
Right.
it's fine now.
Okay, so you can hear now just fine?
Yes,
Oh,
yes, it's
okay,
good.
Great. Yeah, sounds good on your end as well. So perfect. All right, so we were just asking if there were any items to either be removed or added to the agenda for this evening before adoption. And hearing none, the recommendation is that the agenda for the June 9th regular meeting of council be adopted as presented. Moved by Councillor Lang, seconded by Councillor Brown. Any discussion? All those in favor? That motion is carried. Adoption of the minutes. If there are no errors or omissions, the recommendation is that the minutes of the May 26th regular meeting of council be adopted as presented by Councillor Brown, seconded by Councillor Lang. Any discussion? All those in favor? It's carried. Well, we will now move into general matters. We have no art at council tonight, but we do have a presentation this evening from the Kaslo District Community Forest Society. We have manager Jeff Raden in the room, and we also have Travis Emsland, and I close my phone, and with FSBC,
Forest Enhancement Society.
Forest Enhancement Society of BC. So I'll welcome you, Travis, to say a few words. And then I understand that you have a video that you would like us to play.
Hi, everyone.
Awesome.
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. First of all, thank you for inviting me. This is quite an honor. I appreciate it. My name's Travis Emsland. I'm one of the operations managers with the Forest Enhancement Society. And this year, myself and my three colleagues were meeting with our executive director, Jason Fisher, and he mentioned to us that he wanted to have a new inaugural award for, and it would be an annual award for the best community forest project of the year. And after some deliberation, it was unanimous. We selected the Kaslo and District Community Forest, and specifically the Jimmy Crack Corn project. The Jimmy Crack Corn project was just an excellent example of collaboration and meeting a lot of needs for your community and working with different stakeholders and coming to a consensus and doing a wonderful job that's benefits both the stakeholders as well as the community, and the collaboration with an individual property owner, allowing the use of his driveway for some heavy equipment to get in there and moving logs and debris. It was just an all around great project, and yeah, that's about all I have. But I don't actually have the video. I'm hoping that somebody else has the video to press play that we can watch. Maybe
Yes.
maybe Elise.
Just a few minutes ago.
Yes, staff has a copy of the
Okay.
presentation, so we'll get that queued up. Thank you, Travis.
My pleasure.
While it's getting ready, did you have anything you would like to say as manager of the community forest?
No, Fez funds millions of dollars of projects per year, and we've been doing lots of work for the past 8 years or so around Kaslo, so it's great to be chosen for Project of the Year from them.
Well, congratulations.
I spent about $200,000 per year on local contractor work in town, so it's a great revenue generator too for contractors.
Excellent. All right.
Well done, man. It's awesome.
Suggestions. Okay. Sorry, I tried sharing from this one. It's not working, so I'm gonna share it from that one. No. Yeah, there.
Think of what if.
A lot. A lot.
Let's see.
People I can't hear. Elise sent me a message. She's here. And Eric is saying the same thing, no audio.
Sorry, there seems to be audio issues. Do you have a suggestion with it?
I have no idea.
This it's not muted. My apologies.
We got audio issues with the last week at the conference. And
Oh,
Okay,
really, it's on you guys.
but they can hear us, no problem. Speaking?
can you hear us speaking? If you give a thumbs up to that, then we'll know whether it's a video problem. Okay, so then it's just with the video. Okay. All right.
Sharing.
What do you want to do?
Well,
Oh, it says share sound on the right, share options. There.
okay. we'll give it another quick try here and, yeah, if you could let us.
As well
Let us
as the
know.
community at large in the pre-planning process to see what the desired outcomes were for the project.
I think the fact that the ecological values and the habitat was maintained, and then it opened up the visual corridors and improved our sightlines as recreation users, that was a bonus.
It's a perfect example of how we can make our communities safer while also enhancing the recreational opportunities for everyone.
The forest before the project started, due to previous mountain pine beetle infestations and root rot centers in the Doug fir, there's a lot of blowdown. So here we're looking at a pre-treatment stand of what the project area did look like. The pine's dead, it's been blowing over for the past bunch of years. It's elevated, it's dry, it's a high flammable fuel source. There's also lots of dry blowdown on the ground. The aim of this project was to clean up these fuel sources and increase the welfare resiliency of this area.
We were in here in 2024, 25 winter. Had a crew about up to 6 or 7 people working in here. The prescription was to eliminate a lot of the lower ladder fuels and dead debris. By opening up the stand here, we've allowed the sunshine to come in and create a more resilient stand within the forest here. Example is these deciduous plants starting to regrow.
Work like this allows us to keep local contractors busy. It makes me feel great knowing that local people are employed. It's a way for the community forest to give back to the community. A great example of collaboration for this project is working with the adjacent private landowner. Access was an issue for the site for the crews, so working with the local landowner here, we were out to use their driveway to access the unit plus stage in that area.
This project was an excellent example of collaboration between the Forest Enhancement Society, the Community Forest Association, the Kaslo and District Community Forest, local, provincial governments.
This is a positive experience that brings people together in the community, from private landowners to recreation folks to concerned citizens who don't know how they feel about different forest management.
There are many reasons why I feel like we should be proud of the work that we're done here. We're incredibly lucky to have Jeff Radin as the manager of the community forest, to have all of the leaders and all of the various organizations willing to step up. We should be really proud of the fact that we're working together to create something bigger than all of us.
Well, thank you. And did you want to say anything, Councillor Brown?
Yeah, I would just say, I'm really proud of the work that Community Forest has done, and we feel really honored to be chosen as the first project of the year, and we're looking forward to lots of more exciting projects in the future.
Well, thank you, and thank you again for presenting the award to the Kaslo Community Forest. Honored that our community had a project that was so outstanding that it deserved the recognition. So that's thanks to the staff and the board of the Community Forest, and thank you to those at the Forest Enhancement Society for recognizing the hard work. Right? You can stay and listen to the rest of the meeting if you want, or you could take the opportunity to sign off. Thanks, Jeff, for attending. Thanks. All right. And then we have a delegation now from Kaslo Baseball and Softball Association. There's a presentation that will be queued up. And Matthew Brown, acting as president of the Kaslo Baseball and Softball Association, will be conducting the delegation.
The opportunity to speak today. We're just going to be speaking about the projects that KBSA has done over the last 7 or 8 years at the field of Martyrs Memorial, and we have some pictures to accompany. Anytime you're ready.
I'm just switching it to the other computer because we had
Over.
those issues. So my apologies.
So the first few pictures are just going to be a reminder kind of what the field was traditionally like. When we first started our work, it was kind of a dirt infield, dirt and sand kind of infield. This is actually beginning. This is the beautiful field we have now. But if you go to the second and third, we'll show what the infield used to look like. And on a dry day, it was just basically a dust field that we would walk through. And once you fielded the ball, you kind of looked your way through the dust and threw it over to first. And on a wet day, it was just mud. And either we couldn't play or we were kind of swimming our way around to get to wherever we needed to get to. And so the first few pictures will just remind us what the infield looked like. And then we'll see what the outfield was looking like as well. So this is an example of what the infield looked like at the end of the game. You can see just walking to stay in the game. Here we've got dust coming up everywhere. And you know, we all love balls, so we were happy to play everywhere we could. But we did clearly see that there was room for some improvement when we could envision what that might look like. And so the next picture is the same thing, just from the other view. And then so if you go back to your 2 pictures, I believe, it'll show you what the infield and outfield look like. There, you can kind of see the infield and outfield almost aren't delineated because the grass was just kind of dead and patchy all throughout. And there wasn't any systems to water regularly. It was also fairly wavy. So as you ran in the outfield, you kind of took a little journey on your way to the ball. The next one will show kind of just how patchy all the different areas were. And this is in the early spring when we still had rain, which is why we do see some green areas. The last picture was later in the summer when there hadn't been much irrigation. Yeah. And so the next picture goes through some of the getting the field improvements. So the first work that KBSA did is we got a grant, and the first 3 pictures or 4 pictures will be things that KBSA has been able to do through grant funded projects. So the first one was to replace, and the last picture you would have seen that little white chain link that went across. And that was traditionally what was here. Didn't stop any balls from coming into the road. It was mostly just there as a visual effect. There was no safety aspect to it. It was just traditionally what was there. And now you can see a picture of what is currently there, which was the fence that ran all the way to this corner. That was the first grant. It was through Columbia Basin Trust. I believe it was around $10,000 to $12,000 to be able to get that done for it. So the next picture is a grant that a series of grants that we got 2 years ago to do upgrades, and this is the batting cage that was installed. And the batting cage, as we only have 1 field, allowed us to be able to have multiple practices at the same time. So functionally doubling our space that we were able to. So now we're able to have a youth practice while adults are in the batting cage or vice versa. This was one of the aspects of the grant fund that we got a couple of years ago through the Village of Kaslo and the RDCK. The next picture will be this scoreboard that was installed that declares Rick Pierce Memorial Field and allows us to now know what score it is and what game we're in and have a general idea of how many ups there are. So it's been really great, but it's actually also been really great for the youth. When teams are coming from out of town, scorekeeping, everything is just so much easier. And, you know, it really looks beautiful and it's a great addition to the field. So those are the things that were funded through grants. So the next section is things that were funded solely through KVSA. So these were funds that Kaslo Baseball and Softball Association put in. So the first one was in-ground irrigation. This is just shows the infield, but there's also in-ground irrigation all throughout the outfield as well. But that transformed the outfield from patchy grass to the beautiful full outfield we currently enjoy, and made it so that we are able to water the grass that's in the infield, which we'll get to, and then as well as the shale, which keeps it from dusting on us. The next thing we outgrew when we originally started, we had a little shed that was part of the Sam's, like where you would eat, like, and we outgrew that quite quickly, so we purchased a shed actually from the Nelson Baseball Association to expand where we can keep equipment. And yeah, so then we were able to house adult and children equipment there for a period of 2 or 3 years before we outgrew that. So the next aspect is the timber frame dugouts. These were 100% funded by Kaslo Baseball and Softball Association. We also have some really generous donations from Timber Trust and Lisa Smith, and tons of volunteer time from KVSA. Josh, who's here, was actually like I would estimate, but in hundreds of hours into this project. From planning and through actually building. He was there every day and making sure it's happening. So this is just a picture of the beginning timber frames that were donated. And then the next pictures will just show kind of the interior of the new dugouts that replaced the old dugouts. And the old dugouts, I don't know if you remember, the blue one was kind of crumbling and falling apart, and one corner was kind of falling down. And so now we have these beautiful timber frame dugouts that we can enjoy for a very, very long time. So the next work that we're going to kind of highlight, when we first got here, you saw there was a lot of dirt in the infield, and we were working with the Nelson Baseball Association and looking at their Queen Elizabeth field. And they suggested a contractor that they want you to get some red shale. So the next picture is a picture of what the original infield after the first renovation looks like. So you can see in that small circle and then a small little area around. That's originally where we put the red shale. It was a fairly narrow infield, but it would accommodate a 60-foot base path, which is what youth and the adult slow pitch use. So for that time, because we didn't have any of the older kids, we just had a T-ball, a rookie, and a minors. This was the perfect field for us. So we brought in some red shale. Every time we bring a super B of red shale in, it costs somewhere between $6,000 and $8,500. It's slowly gotten more expensive over the years. But that was, I think, the first one that we did was 2 super Bs, and since I think we probably had 6 super Bs since then come to Kaslo. So yeah, I would estimate we probably put between $30,000 and $40,000 worth of shale into the field. And then the next one will show you what the original infield looked like. So that's kind of a really shallow infield where the second base pad almost touches the edge. But already in this picture, you can see the grass is green. We now have an infield, some infield grass, and the irrigation started to do its work and build up to the field that we know and enjoy today. So this is after I think 2 or 3 years, the youth got to a point where they needed to extend the base paths to 90 feet in order to be able to play full baseball. Anything over U15, we needed to have a 90-foot base path. As we can't get a second baseball field, we decided to expand this field, as they did at Queen Elizabeth and Nelson, to make it a multi-use field. So now we can accommodate anything, any form of baseball or softball. We have big bags at 60 feet and at 90 feet. So now as our youth get to the age where they're playing full baseball, this field can now accommodate them. So we basically had to double the shale. We brought in more shale and all of the draining rock and all of the things that went in below. And this is an example. And the next picture kind of shows from the first baseline. how far we have to extend to get to that 90-foot base path, which is basically how far we extended. And then the next picture, which is the last picture, we brought in portable pitching mats. So this is one of the ones for the minors, and then we have one for U15 as well. In order to not have to, like, there wasn't the ability to build a clay mound, a permanent clay mound into the field. And so we brought in this one cost about $3,500. The other one cost around $6,000 to get prefabricated mounds that are, go up and slope at the right angle and make sure that we're able to meet all the requirements of youth baseball. And so that the next slide shows the infield work. We funded and installed the shell that's in the infield currently. So this is a picture of the shell, the infield turf coming. And the next picture is some of the installation and what it looked like right after. So this was something that was fully funded and that we were able to install as well. And then that was another aspect of turning the infield into what it is today. So I will point out I don't have pictures for these things, but we also KDSA funded the memorial bench for this is assistant of the year and all supporter advocate, and a new infield tarp that will cover the entire infield that ensures the games can still be played on days that might rain and make the field unplayable. And we did receive a $500 grant from the village of Kaslo as well towards that. And this last slide just goes through kind of the regular maintenance and volunteer hours that go in every season from KVSA. So we drive the field usually around 10 times a week. After every youth practice we drag, and after every single game, the winner has the honor of dragging the field. We also aerate the infield as well to make sure the grass isn't growing in on either end to make sure everything's continuing to be defined and that we can continue to have the shell kind of true grass free. We lay down all the chalk lines for games for foul and fair territory, as well as the batter's boxes. We top up the shale in the areas that have become recessed or worn down during gameplay to ensure that there's no puddling that occurs or any dangerous areas. Unfortunately, the old and the new dugouts have had a bit of graffiti, and we clean those up and we get rid of the graffiti and take care of the dugouts in that nature as well. And we volunteer hundreds of hours towards youth ball for coaching, umpiring, field maintenance, and league planning yearly. Hundreds is actually probably low, it's probably closer to 1,000. And we do the same thing, hundreds of hours of adult for the slow pitch for field maintenance, umpiring, league planning yearly. So combined volunteer hours are well over 1,000 hours a season that our community is putting back into the field and into our youth and into our back into our community. And then on top of that, we do various fundraising activities for the field and ballpark improvements, such as our playoffs, and then we always do an all-star event. And then there are other that's true. A logging truck from the community forest was donated to baseball, and we cut that out into firewood, and we delivered it out through the community at a really great rate. And we're always looking for opportunities to fundraise where we can help the community, and we can also help build more future infrastructure for the field. In terms of what we would like to do in the future, we have I think that we all feel that we've addressed the field safety wise. It's in really good condition, and it's a place we're proud to have host other communities to come and see. And now we're starting to talk about kind of the fan experience and the seating, and maybe finding a way to cover it for them to stay out of the sunlight and be a little bit more comfortable and expand as we're starting to get sometimes hundreds of people watching games on any given day. So we'll continue to do what we're doing and try to continue to make the field the best place that we can possibly make it. And we'd be happy to have any questions regarding.
Right. Well, your presentation went a little longer than anticipated, so we'll, if you don't mind, we'll move on in the agenda. I wanted to give you enough time to get through your presentation, so. All right. So that brings us to our public input portion of the evening. So we'll now open our first public input period, and speakers may address council only on items of business appearing on tonight's agenda. This period is limited to 15 minutes. If you could indicate by raising your hand, a virtual hand, if you can find it online, then I can call upon you and staff can invite you to unmute. And so I will call upon you, and if you could please give your name and your place of residence. You will have 2 minutes to speak. And after all speakers have had an opportunity to provide their input, council members have the opportunity to ask clarifying questions through the chair. And council will not engage in debate. And if speakers' input relates to operational issues, staff will be happy to assist them during regular business hours. And please note that council may not respond directly to your question or comment, but all public input is taken into consideration and it may be referenced later in the meeting when the related item is discussed. So, are there any members of the public that would like to ask a question at this point? You can raise your virtual hand. I will call upon you. Seeing anyone in the room have any questions this evening? I still see no hands, so thank you all for joining. And we have received no written submissions, so we'll move into the reports from council and staff. I have provided a written report, as has Councillor Brown. Are there any questions regarding either of our written reports from other members of council? Okay, hearing none. Are there any reports from either Councillor Bird or Councillor Lang? No? No? All right. Then we'll move on to CAO Baker's report.
Thank you, Mayor Hewitt. Moment while I maximize my screen here. So, council's feedback in recent weeks has been to expand the reporting that staff provides. So there's an overhaul to the CAO report, which we'll go through. Focuses on 4 key areas, being council strategic priorities, 19 projects and 88 tasks, as well as council's objectives and measures. These are in addition to your strategic priorities. There's 4 objectives and 25 measures. We'll also go through outstanding council resolutions. So there's 92 that we're currently tracking, 82 have been completed. These resolutions don't include things like adoption of the agenda or previous minutes. They're focused on actionable items for staff. And then the final component would be the mandate that council and CAO have developed, 10 goals and 36 action items. First, we have a dashboard for your strategic priorities showing 30 items that have been completed, which is about a third of all of your tasks. 19 remain in progress, 10 were canceled. Those would be related to the arena mechanical system and emergency power supply. And then there's 29 tasks that have yet to be started. Many of them will be accomplished by year end. So this page here provides you with a snapshot of where your strategic priorities are at. The next slide shows you all of your strategic priorities. They haven't been broken down by task, but these are the project headings, and it gives you a snapshot of where we're at with completion. Noting that there's 5 that are nearing 100% completion, a few that are in the midway point, and then a few that are still in the preliminary stages. 4 tasks are overdue that council was apprised about. I believe at its last, or it could have been 2 meetings ago. 3 of them were related to the Kemble Memorial Center. 1 is related to the flood and erosion planning project. And so adjustments were made in the second quarter to provide more staff resources toward the Kemble Memorial Center project and get us back on track. So we have a plan in place, and we'll keep council up to date as that project progresses. Moving into the objectives and measures, there are 2 projects that have already been completed, 13 that are in process, and 10 that have not started yet. Just a reminder for council, this includes projects that are for 2026 and 2027. And so there are projects that you won't see any action on in 2026, including the wharf demolition project, and you'll see limited activity on the Moy Amphitheater project. The next couple of slides provide council with detail of what these objectives and measures are: asset management, the Moy Amphitheater and wharf demolition, and then a number of objectives related to administrative improvements. On the right-hand side, you'll note that there's policies and bylaws that are to be reviewed and potentially updated. And so council has already looked at a couple of these earlier this year, and the remainder will be brought forward in due course. The next area would be council's resolutions. So as noted, there's 88 that are being tracked, 78 are already completed. There's 10 that are still in progress. And those 10 are listed in this presentation in case council has any questions about their status. And then the final component is the CAO mandate. So these are the goals that were established for your CAO. And from staff's perspective, all 36 of them are on target. 36 action items related to 10 goals. So what I'd like to note is that this report that you'll receive every council meeting moving forward will give council the opportunity to ask questions on any of these topics. So most of the information is going to remain the same. The only thing that'll be updated every council meeting would be projects that are completed or progress that's being made, but the items are going to remain virtually the same. So if you hold on to this document that you now have, you can bring back any questions for next council meeting and thereon. What I'd also like to note is that this reporting framework is fairly good. Strategic priorities, objectives and measures, your council resolutions, and your CAO mandate. But it is missing a component, and that was brought up by council in recent weeks. It doesn't fully reflect day-to-day operational activities that have been delegated to staff and are currently being administered in accordance with your bylaws and policies. And so council's indicated they'd like to have greater visibility into the effectiveness of our village operations. What that means is for 2027, staff will present a service area budget. That means we're going to have all of our work organized into various different service areas, and council will take a look at the services we provide and have an understanding of the level of service for each one. The managers for the village are then going to identify objectives and measures for all of these different service areas. And that's what they'll be responsible for managing throughout the year, is the effectiveness of these various service areas. So what that would provide council is visibility into village operations and round out this CAO report. So starting in some point, hopefully in early 2027, the objectives and measures that you're currently viewing will look different. There'll be operational objectives and measures. And that's how we're going to give council insight into how effective operations are. So I know council hasn't had a lot of time to review all of the information within this CAO report, but at least it gives you an idea of what you'll see in the future, and certainly open to any questions you might have now.
Yes, my first question would be, did a copy get emailed to councillors Bird and Leafwood so they can review it and offer any comment for the next meeting?
Yes, they've been emailed a copy, so they
Excellent.
might not have checked it for the meeting, but they certainly have a copy in their inbox.
Thank you. Are there any questions from council at this time? And knowing that we can bring our questions back at the next meeting if, yeah, because there is a lot of information in there. And thank you very much for the new format. Great. Questions?
No question.
Councillor Brown.
Through the chair. When we're looking at percentages, something we had talked about is possibly weighing different tasks so that we could see if these percentages, different tasks might have different impacts. So they might not just be as clear as one task is one per, a certain percentage. Were you able to find out a formula to weigh certain tasks, or is it just each task is considered the same?
Through the chair, so this gives council a fairly accurate representation of the progress on the project, not divided up by task, but how close the project is to completion.
Have the supplemental, right? All right, so that brings us to our consent agenda. So the consent agenda is intended for non-controversial routine items which do not require discussion or debate. And they may be grouped together under a consent agenda and dealt with one resolution of council. Any member may request that an item be included that is included on the consent agenda may be removed from the consent agenda to be dealt with separately. Are there any items that council wish to pull from the consent agenda for individual discussion and not be considered as a block under the consent agenda? Seeing none, the recommendation is that the items listed on the consent agenda for the meeting of June 9th, 2026 be adopted as presented. And that means that all of the resolutions that come with it are duly adopted when we move that one motion. Okay, moved by Councillor Brown, seconded by Councillor Lang. Any discussion? All those in favor? It's carried. So then we will move into business items. The first item is fees and charges bylaw regarding Murray Pearson Memorial Ballpark. Ask Councillor Brown.
And I will recuse myself from this conversation as I am the president of Baseball and Softball Association.
And it's note, Councillor Brown. CAO Baker has a presentation regarding the fees and charges bylaws. So I'll hand it over to CAO Baker.
Thank you, Mayor Hewitt. So there is a staff report that council's been provided. And what I'm going to do is give you a presentation on that staff report. So all of the information in the staff report is reflected in this presentation, plus there's additional detail. So the purpose is to present options for council's consideration related to ballpark rental fees. This was directed by council at a previous meeting where it was asked that the information be brought forward to the June 9th meeting. We're also going to identify for council that there could be the need for a policy that would guide future rate reviews. To put this into context, we had a resolution at April 28th to have this discussion today, June 9th. The ballpark rates form part of a broader outdoor space rentals table that's within your fees and charges bylaw. Those fees have not been substantially updated since 2018, so it's been 8 years. And the annual operating cost of the ballpark is estimated at $50,000. So under the current fee structure, about $1,200 is charged to the Kaslo Baseball Softball Association through bylaw fee charges. The bylaw fees are approximately $20 a day. It's a flat rate for all users. And that's been in place in one form or another since 2018. There was a very recent update to it to lower it, but generally speaking, it's remained unchanged. Why is the change needed? Well, the current framework does not distinguish between outdoor spaces that require a lot of maintenance and have higher operating costs versus outdoor spaces that have lower operating costs. So I could give you the examples of perhaps the gazebo would be $30 a day, which has fairly low operations and maintenance costs compared to the ballpark, which is also $30 a day, but certainly has much higher operating costs. A flat rate of $20 a day applies equally to both youth and adult bookings. And when, depending on how it's applied, this could favor adults. So the example would be if you have 20 adults playing a softball game, 20 adults divided by $20 per day would be about $1 per adult. Often you have 10 youth on a baseball team. Even for a game, the visiting team does not pay for the field. And so if you have 10 youth players divided by $20, they're paying approximately $2 for that field use. Not to suggest that that's how the Baseball Softball Association applies its fees, but you can see how there could be a perceived inequality when there aren't separate rates for youth and adult. Further to that, there's many ballpark users that reside outside the village of Kaslo, and yet it's Kaslo taxpayers that ultimately pay for the full cost of operating and maintaining the facility, which means they're in effect subsidizing non-residents. Options that have been presented for council assume that there's about 170 youth hours in a year and an operating cost of $50,000. Currently, the recovery rate based on what's being charged to the Baseball Softball Association is 2.4%. It equates to $4.44 an hour and approximately $755 a year. Staff are recommending that council consider a change in this recovery rate. Options have been provided anywhere from 3% all the way up to 10%. When it comes to the cost of adults using the facility, there's about 100 hours of usage in any given year at a recovery rate of 2.4%. Again, the hourly rate is $4.44, and staff are recommending that council select a recovery rate somewhere between 2.4% and 15%. And these tables provide council with an idea of how much that would cost per hour. Staff certainly respect that an increase in any of these fees would have an impact on users. And so there's an option being provided where perhaps council phases in any increases so that it's not a doubling of fees in a given year, but it's extended over a number of years. So in this example, $1,200 is what the Baseball Softball Association currently pays, and in 2027, perhaps it's $1,800. In 2028, perhaps it's $2,600, and 2029, $3,400. And so the intent here would be to slowly phase in this increase in user fees. Again, that hasn't substantially increased in 8 years. To compare to our regional partners, including the Regional District of Central Kootenay, Nelson, and Kaslo, a Kaslo rate of $9.25 an hour would still be substantially lower than our neighbor in Nelson and significantly lower than the Regional District. Similar numbers apply for adult and other nonprofit, and commercial is a bit of an anomaly here. I don't believe Kaslo has had any commercial bookings. that I'm aware of.
Okay, if you could please not speak, because it interferes with the sound for people who are online. Yeah, if you could, please not talk during the presentation. Thank you.
And so staff recommend that we set a base rate, which would be the commercial rate, that's been calculated at $185 per hour. And that would be what would be charged to commercial users, with significant reductions for all other users. Maybe just a quick note, it's very challenging to compare Kaslo's rates to other municipalities because the operating context is entirely different. It's always comparing apples and oranges. You can't, no matter how you skin it, these numbers can't be looked at as equitable. There's different cost structures in other communities, different amount of volunteerism versus staff labor being used. Facilities are of a different age. And so I would caution council from drawing direct comparisons to neighboring communities, and instead focus on what is the cost to operate in Kaslo, and what do you want your cost recovery rates to be for youth, adult, other nonprofits versus commercial. And that brings us back to the percentages that are presented in this presentation. I had a presentation tonight from the Baseball Softball Association about volunteer contributions, which are summarized here through capital investments and ongoing maintenance. And so council's been provided with a few options. One would be that ballpark fees are established with separate cost recovery targets for youth versus adult, and that there be phased implementation over 3 years. And further, that staff be directed to develop a rate review policy to ensure that our fees don't go out of date and it's another 8 years before they're reviewed again. Second option would be that council defer a decision until after the 2026 election. The third would be that we retain the current structure, which is approximately $20 a day for all users. And the third option would be that council scrap the idea of having a bylaw with hourly or daily rates and simply negotiate ballpark rentals through agreements on a as-needed basis. To summarize our financial considerations, the ballpark has an estimated operating cost. It's not being suggested that any of the users fully pay for this cost recovery. Certainly there's going to be general taxation. And so we're back to the question of, we have general taxation, and what percentage of our overall costs should users pay? Costs are not recovered through user fees. Sorry, skip that one. Proposed increase from $1,200 upwards reflects years of deferred rate review and not a sudden cost escalation. Periodic user fee reviews is part of a broader financial sustainability strategy alongside tax increases and grants, debt financing. And there's been discussion about the ballpark would cost $50,000 whether the Baseball Softball Association used it or not. And so certainly that's true in many respects. It's also true that if the ballpark didn't exist, there's an opportunity cost. It could be used for campground expansion and significantly higher revenue being generated by the village. What staff are recommending is that council set a subsidy level that's transparent, fair, and sustainable. And I will stop there and hand it over to council.
All right. Do members of council have any questions for CEO Baker on the report? Councillor Lang.
Yes, through the chair. I'm a little uncertain where this $50,000 is coming from. I'm wondering what the village does besides cut the grass.
Through the chair, the $50,000 is intended to include not only staff time, but also the wear and tear on equipment, the materials that are required, insurance for the property, and asset renewal. So we have a sprinkler system, we have fencing, we have grass, and all of this requires funding to renew it over the years. So council, I know, is aware that we have a deficit in our asset renewal. I believe an argument could be made, that the $50,000 is perhaps too high. Depending on what you want to include in operating and maintenance costs. So realistically, I would say that somewhere, but the real cost is going to be, depending how you look at it, somewhere between $35,000 and $50,000 a year.
You just have a supplement. Yep, go ahead, Councillor Lang.
Yeah, so in terms of revenue generation, the only real revenue the ball field generates is what comes from the baseball association and the kids' baseball, right? Like nobody walks in here and says, I'd like to book the field for Saturday, July 5th or whatever. How much is it gonna cost me? Does that ever happen?
The chair, very few bookings. I believe in 2025, there was 2 bookings other than the Baseball Softball Association. So a rate's been proposed for those other users. So it could be a nonprofit that doesn't provide as much service as the Baseball Softball Association, hence perhaps they should pay more. Same rate that would be paid by individuals that might rent it for a birthday party. And then, of course, there's the much higher commercial rate, which we have not had a commercial entity request to book the field.
Okay. Councillor Bird, did you have any questions at this time? Yep, go ahead. So we'll have the others. I don't know, does she's. Okay.
Yes, through the chair. So I'm going to start with what I think is the larger question, and it relates to the beginning of your presentation where you were discussing the range of outdoor spaces that are available for a fee. And it seems to me, it's clear to me that the Baseball Association is in effect acting as a partner in delivering service to the community. And so there's partnership agreements, which I never seem to see in any of the literature that is spelled out what exactly a partnership agreement means and what other partnership agreements that we have. It's so I would divide up the fees and charges. There's going to be cost recovery, of course, for like that as an element of any kinds of fees and charges. But in terms of in this particular situation, I would prefer to see it considered as a partnership agreement with the village, and in which case I think a negotiation is a more reasonable approach, that we negotiate the different kind of roles and responsibilities of the village vis-a-vis the Kaslo Baseball Association. And further to that, as far as the percentage of cost recovery that should be expected, that I think actually like what you need to do is you start with the fees that you have, and you can only increase it so much or you lose your partnership opportunity, because in fact people won't be able to pay for it, and then suddenly you've lost that partnering opportunity. So during a negotiation, certainly certainly the cost recovery is an important point to make, but you also have to weigh that against the ability of the proponent, the partner, to pay. So I would suggest something like you would make a negotiation, you have an agreement, and then you put in like a 15% increase per annum with the understanding that this is long overdue. I got quite a lot of other comments, but maybe you'd like to speak, Madam Mayor?
No, you can go ahead.
I do think you make a very good point about the difference between the rates that should be charged to youth and adults, because when adults generally will, it's for a parent who you might have one or two or even three kids in baseball, and as far as I know, there's no grant funding to like there is in hockey to help with the fees. And also, it's just there are fewer kids, and maybe we need to be more supportive of that. So I like that idea that the fee structure should reflect whether it's youth baseball or adult baseball. So that's my positive comment on that one. And I did have another point and it'll come to me.
Mind if I provide some information on partnering agreements?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes.
Thank you, Mary Hewitt. So just a comment on partnering agreements, so council's aware. When an organization is primarily delivering a service on behalf of the village or advancing a municipal objective where there's responsibilities and accountability, then the arrangement can be structured as a partnering agreement rather than a user a user fee agreement. So right now you have in effect a user fee agreement with the Baseball Softball Association. In order to transition to a partnering agreement, the entire relationship would need to change from what it is now. So first, the village would need to determine that providing baseball and softball services is a village service, whereas right now it's done through a nonprofit organization. And then you would enter into a partnering agreement where the partner, in this case, the Baseball Softball Association, would be providing that service. Those types of agreements are done when a municipality is looking for value for money. There's specialized expertise within the association that the municipality doesn't have, sharing of risk, et cetera, et cetera. Right now, the village does not have any partnering agreements, and there's quite a process that the village would have to go through in order to create that kind of relationship. What it sounds like we're talking about when we're negotiating agreements with the Baseball Softball Association is option number 4 that's provided by way of that staff report. Thanks, Mayor Hewitt.
So did you have a follow-up with Councillor Bird?
Thank you for that. That gives me some clarity about partnership agreements, which I haven't had before. So thank you. But the final point that I did have was when you were speaking about how we were subsidizing non-Kaslo residents, would it not seem like a reasonable thing to do to use those community development grants, like to assume that some part of that would go to sports that are inclusive of Area D residents or activities, and that would definitely qualify? Like that the RDCK should be approached to, do their fair share, basically.
So I can provide context there. We have our own stream. So if you applied for a Kaslo community development grant for that, it would still be money that is just from Kaslo residents. You would have an application would have to be made to Director Watson, who is the Area D director now, and to access her funds, because she has her own allotment of funds and Kaslo has its own allotment. So it's just applying to community development does not hit residents outside of the village boundaries. There's 2 different programs. Same program, but 2 different directors who manage those. And for ours, I've chosen to have it run through council and come with a council resolution before I'll support it at the board table. So it just by meaning to say that it does not hit the mark that you're thinking that it would.
It's also the 10,000 park.
There is a recreation, yeah, parks and recreation. But again, that's coming specifically to Kaslo, because there's other, I don't know whether you heard CAO Baker's question. We do get $10,000 per year through the shared service for delivering parks and recreation in Kaslo. But again, that is money for Kaslo, because in that same budget, there is money that goes to the Lardo Park, to to the 5 different halls in Area D. So there's sort of an equalization. So we get some funding for our recreational facilities, the arena, curling club, and they get it for theirs. So again, it isn't serving the purpose that you're wanting it to. In my view, because I've sat through those meetings for just about 12 years now, and I know how that works. So I don't know whether that helps you or not.
Not much. I mean, thank you for the explanation, but it obviously if RDCK funds were to be tapped with, because they do know that that Area D players are involved in the sport, then it sounds like the association or the individual players themselves have to apply through Director Watson for RDCK funding. And maybe that's a suggestion that could go forward. I don't know.
I did want to add a couple of things. Another thing an item that goes under that $50,000 budget would be the increased washroom usage, and which we pay the campground operator for the maintenance of those washrooms. Another comment I wanted to make is I would like to see there be a rate differential that does recognize that the significant volunteer contributions that are made by KBSA, because the way it's structured now with the motion that we had previously made is that any other user would get the same benefit. To me, that basically it takes away there is no benefit. It benefits everyone, and it doesn't. So KBSA has put the work into it for the enjoyment of everyone. And I think the intent was to recognize their contributions, which have been significant. And that, I don't know how we could do that, but I would like to see that happen in the rates, that they're not all the same. And go ahead, Councillor Lang.
Yeah, through the chair. I believe CAO Baker made one of the options in front of council was defer this till after the election. And I think that's an excellent idea. We've got rates established for this year. All documents are signed that need to be signed, I believe. And so any rate changes will not go into effect till 2027. So I'd like to make a motion that we table this item until after the election.
Okay, so moved by Councillor Lang to refer this to after the election. You don't have to, if you would like to make an alternative or would like to have further discussion before having a motion put on the table, that's totally acceptable. But we would like to be able to give staff direction.
Yes. Well, I'll second his motion for discussion, or
Okay.
second it so that we can discuss it.
Okay. And you have discussion on the motion that was proposed by Councillor Lang?
Yeah, I'm sure if I was staff, I would just hate the idea of running this through again with a new council who will have as much difficulty as we will, and it'll push it and push it and push it till again we'll be like right close to registration time. The difficulty I have is putting a number on the so to explain why I think another council would have the same difficulty is just to put a number on the cost recovery. That's where I find it difficult. And thing is, if we do go for, I think it's option 4 with a negotiated agreement, yes, that is more work for staff, like per year. But once you negotiate shouldn't call it an agreement, should I? Once you negotiate basically a lease or a fees rates, then you can do it for a 5-year period with incremental changes. You get some stability and you don't have to revisit it in any depth year after year. But I think it is time that we make a call on just get past this because we could defer this forever because it's difficult.
Then you're speaking against
I am,
the
yes,
motion.
I am speaking against.
Right, and so there's only the 3 of us. And I actually, for the same reasons that Councillor Bird has outlined, I usually don't speak until I vote, but I would agree that we would be putting in a new council and staff in an awkward position because it would be a steep learning curve and learning their role, plus have something like this, and then it puts uncertainty for both the council and KDSA. And we don't want to put them in that position where they're trying to decide what their rate is, anticipate what their rate will be. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion? And opposed? Councillor Bird. And did you want your negative vote recorded?
Sure.
Okay. And I'm also opposed, so that motion is defeated. Actually, I wanted to, this isn't an option, but I wanted to suggest it as an option, is a hybrid between setting fees and charges for every other user group, but with a specific negotiated agreement for KBSA, taking them totally out of it, but not changing how we structure the fees and charges for every other user. So we just have fees and charges, which applies to absolutely everybody else, but then the negotiated agreement with KBSA, which gives that recognition of the contributions that they've made. And then it doesn't mean constant, well, we'll still review fees and charges each council, but then it gives more surety on both sides. Is that something that is workable? Because I know it's not an option, but I just thought it might be something that would work for both of us.
Mayor, here what I think. So it would look somewhat like what Kaslo's had in place for a number of years. The difference would be, if I can offer a suggestion, let's say it's a 15% cost recovery for other nonprofits and individuals, which would equate to $27.75 an hour. And keeping in mind that there was only 2 of these bookings in 2025. And so if somebody's booking it for a kid's birthday party, what you're grappling with here is it reasonable for someone to have a kid's birthday party to be paying $27.75 to use the field for that hour? And further to that, what staff would recommend would be that commercial users be charged at 100% recovery rate, which would be $185 an hour. Keeping in mind, we haven't had any of that. And then what council would do is negotiate periodic agreements with Kaslo Baseball Softball Association for rates that are somewhere under 15%. And that we can coordinate that between now and the end of 2026. So yeah, kind of what you're dealing with is whatever percent you want for other nonprofits and individuals, 5, 10, 15%, 100% for commercial users, and an agreement negotiated with KBSA.
So I could
Go
make,
ahead, Councillor Bird. Yeah.
thank you, through the chair. So I could make the motion that the fees and charges, the aim is for a recovery of 15% for for users, exclusive, excluding KBSA, 100% for commercial users, and that rates be negotiated with Kaslo Baseball and reviewed periodically.
Got it.
All right. Second for that?
Second for discussion.
Okay, discussion, go ahead, Councillor Lang.
Yeah, so can you explain the formula to me again? I'm not hearing it quite right. 15% of what?
Of the estimated total operating cost of $50,000 a year. So if you take that 50,000, we have take that 50,000. What's 15% of it? It equates to $27.75 an hour.
So annual increase would be in the $7,500 range, is that right?
Annual increase in operating costs.
No, in what you charge the baseball association.
So I think at this point, other council members aren't talking about the baseball association at all. They're focused on these other random rentals for a birthday party or some nonprofit that wants to do a charity game. What do we do for them? And it's been suggested.
Okay, sorry, that's where I was missing, and I was missing part of the discussion. Thank you.
Okay. All right, so then that was moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Okay. Call the question then. All those in favor? Okay, it's carried. And so we've already got a negotiated agreement with KBSA for the 2026 season. So it will be up to the next council to determine what the agreement will be, but it could start, whenever KBSA is ready, and prior to them setting their rates for the next year, they would have to communicate with staff to negotiate the rate for the following year. But that would be moved forward, I believe, to the next council. Unless, I don't know.
What I think probably what staff would do is bring back to council a bylaw amendment. So we add the 15% for individuals to rent, 100% for commercial, and also bring back to council the same question of how much do you want to charge KBSA? Should it be hourly? Should it be daily? And what cost recovery do you want to aim for them? So
Okay. All right.
the structure you're going with here is different than what's been recommended.
Yeah.
But the principles will still apply.
Okay.
How much do you want to charge them?
All right, so we've only half solved our problem. Okay, does anyone have any input on that for this evening? As to what the cost recovery we would like for KBSA? Understanding that at this point it's 2.4%, is that correct?
Correct.
And they don't have my presentation open anymore.
I can share it on the screen if you'd like. What council could consider here is, so staff have divided it up between youth and adult. I mean, I don't know if I can make this any bigger. Bear with me. So this is youth, it's assuming 170 hours.
Right.
And right now you're at 2.4%. You, you could really pick any percentage you want. I might suggest you don't go higher than 10%, because then you're getting near what you're charging individuals and other groups that haven't contributed to building the park. So 3%, 5%, 7.5%. And then there's adult. If you want to charge something different to adults versus youth, again, you would just pick what percent, 3%, 5%, 7.5%. So I can, yeah.
So looking at the youth cost recovery at the recommended 5%, that's a dollar an hour per player. Doesn't seem unreasonable, but, and then the same with the recommended for the adult at 93 cents per player per hour, based on 20 players.
Correct.
Yeah.
So,
And
yeah.
youth based on 10 players. So it's saying 93 cents, but more users with adults, because there are typically games, but youth they have a lot of practice times.
Yeah, 170 hours for youth, 100 for adults, and maybe just to go one step further, it's pennies per game, so to speak. It's $1 per player per hour for youth. It could be, somewhere close for adults, but it's still going to be perceived by the public and the users as an increase.
Mhm.
And so that's back to the recommendation that perhaps council consider phasing it in over 3 years so that there's not a big jump in 2027.
Through the chair.
Go ahead, Councillor Bird.
My recommendation would be to set those targets and, where the 3% for youth and 5% for adults, but that they be phased in such a way that there is no more than a 15% jump per year. And I know that's, it's just because we can't, I don't want to phase out, I don't want to make it difficult for people to afford playing. And suddenly when the rates go just above a certain point, then it's, oh, well, I don't, I can't participate. So recognizing that people like have their limits, like about where they're what they can spend. And if 15% seems like it's above inflation, it should help. And I know it's probably lower than the CAO would like to see in terms of cost recovery, but the aim being 3% and 5%, 3% for youth and 5% for adults. But that the fees do not increase more than 15% per year, each year. So it might take longer than 3 years.
Oh, I missed part of what you said, Councillor Bird.
My idea of making sure that the cost recovery does happen over time, but that each year is no more expensive than 15% more than the previous year. So what I'm saying is that it will probably take longer than getting to get to that target of 3% or 5%, probably would take longer than 3 years. But I think it's important to not make increases any more than 15% per year, because I think people can cope with that kind of an increase. Oh.
Um, So I'm just trying to figure out how that fits into the phased in. Is that what is currently in the 2027 phased, or because there's a lot of information here and we have sort of twisted it around on you.
That's quite all right, Mayor Hewitt. It's actually going surprisingly well. So I think what staff can do is come back to another council meeting and give you, what I might call like a 5-year phased approach. Just keep in mind that, council has passed a resolution tonight for other users and commercial, and that rates be negotiated with KBSA through an agreement.
Yes.
And so what you might have on the table here is another motion that is either establishes rates for youth and adult at 3%, 5% to be phased in over a 5-year period, or rates to be negotiated in an agreement to be 3%, 5% and phased in over a 5-year period. And if staff could offer a suggestion for simplicity, it would be nice to have the fees and charges just lay out the rates, these 4 rates, and then we don't need to worry about a separate user fee agreement at all with KBSA. It's simply, we set a 3% now for youth and a 5% now for adult. It's 15% for everyone else and 100% if you're a commercial user. And just simply show council what the fees and charges bylaw will look like for the next 5 years would be the simplest way to do it.
Okay.
But that is different than the motion that's been passed. That says there's going to be a separate agreement. Whereas what I'm suggesting is that you just put it in the bylaw.
Through the chair.
Go ahead, Councillor Bird.
I think our the original motion could still stand. What I thought you were asking about input about what recovery targets would you like Kaslo Baseball to be looking at. That's where I was mentioning whatever cost recovery targets that you put in the negotiations. Bear in mind that council thinks that no more than 15% a year would be reasonable. So I'm still not sure why I thought you were looking for some kind of advice or sort of parameters on what kind of negotiations council would accept. But I still think a negotiation is the proper way to go about it.
That's a good question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So if these rates, 3% youth, 5% adult, phased in over a number of years, we include it in an agreement. What else are we negotiating with KBSA?
Through the chair, roles and responsibilities, who does what, like what kind of maintenance they do and what kind of maintenance that the village will be assuming. And that's, part of any kind of lease agreement, I guess, is who does what and how does it get evaluated and what is the period of review?
And I think, well, part of it would have to be the number of hours of usage, because you'd have to set a baseline, otherwise that changes that. If it's flat fee.
Correct. Correct.
And then if it's every night or every day that it gets used, then it's not available for the village to rent to any of the other users. Therefore, it's somewhat of setting those rates is.
Yeah, so I think what you would see in the agreement wouldn't be a 3% youth, 5% adult. What you would see is the hourly rate that would be charged to them.
Okay.
And there's the underlying assumption that the amount of usage isn't going to fluctuate too much year to year, that it's 170 youth, 100 for adult. If there is a major change in usage, then certainly the rates could be revisited.
Right. And knowing that it will come back to another meeting and we will have Councillor Leithwood back, and there may be further discussion and further revisions once we're all in the room together. Because until we've adopted a bylaw, it isn't in force. So we do not currently have a motion, or did we have a motion on the table? That we did have one. Can you read it back, please?
That the agreement with KBSA be negotiated with rates that include 3% cost recovery for youth, 5% cost recovery for adult, and be phased in at approximately 15% per year.
And using the current rate as the baseline to step up from, correct?
Correct.
Okay, yeah, just so we know what we're dealing with. Okay. All right, so any further discussion on the motion, and do we all understand what we're voting on? Are there any questions, other questions that we need to ask CEO Baker before I call the question? Councillor Lang.
Yeah, through the chair. So how does this fit into what CEO Baker was saying about bringing back another set of figures that more accurately reflect what we're talking about here?
CEO Baker.
Thanks, Mayor Hewitt. So what staff will do is bring back a bylaw that states 15% for individuals and others. It's not going to say 15%, sorry. It'll say $27.75 an hour for other individuals that are renting it one-off, and $185 an hour for commercial users. And it'll state rates for KBSA by agreement. Staff will also bring forward the terms of a draft agreement, and it'll say something like $5.55 an hour for youth and $9.25 an hour for adults, but we don't want to start charging them that in 2027. We'll get there, but it's going to gradually be phased in over a few years until we get to those rates.
Are we ready for the question? Okay, all those in favor? Motion carries. All right. So I think since it's 7:34, we'll take a little break, and then Councillor Brown has already had quite a break, but we'll take a break and then come back and deal with the 9.2, which is the lease of village land policy. You can be ready. All right, so we will reconvene and we'll move into item 9.2, which is lease of village land and buildings policy. And CEO Baker has a presentation for us. CEO Baker.
Thank you, Mayor Hewitt. I'll share my screen and. Okay, so staff were asked to bring forward a policy with respect to lease of village land and buildings. We have a number of leases that come due this year, and so having a policy in place will help streamline the process. Policy would establish principles and criteria and administrative requirements, define various different responsibilities and the types of leases we might have. How do we determine market value, and when would we have a reduced rent or nominal rent arrangements? Worth noting that this would not apply to short-term bookings like a rental of a facility or casual use. Those are governed through our fees and charges bylaw already. And so this would be for leases, licenses, and where there's occupancy of village land and buildings. The structures for council to be aware of would be everything from a gross lease, which is where a tenant would pay a single rent amount, let's say $500 a month. And the village would be responsible for paying all taxes, insurance, utilities, maintenance, and repairs. And at the other end of the spectrum would be what's called an absolute net lease, where all of the costs are put onto the tenant, including structural repairs and capital investment. And so the village would have virtually no obligation to the tenant in that type of a lease. And then between these two bookends, you have a variety of different leases. Modified gross, single net, double net, triple net, and the staff report as well as presentation provide council with what those various different types of structures are. We'll use an example of the thrift store, which we negotiated an agreement with the Auxiliary Society. I believe it was last year, 2025. And so in that case, the tenant pays rent, taxes, and insurance. The village is responsible for structural repairs. And so it's a version of a double net lease. And then you might have the arena, which is a little more convoluted, but is either a triple net or an absolute net, whereby the arena association is responsible for paying rent to the village, taxes, insurance, and maintaining it. And the village is responsible for the structure and major capital investment, or depending on how you interpret the lease, perhaps none of that at all. So gives you an idea of a couple of leases that council might be familiar with. Then there's market and non-market leases. Market leases are typically applied to a business tenant, a commercial activity happening on village land or in our building, and we pay or we charge them what the market would charge them for their lease. And then there's non-market leases, which is the vast majority of the tenants the village has. Nonprofit organizations where they enjoy a reduced or nominal rent. When council is presented with a lease, there's a few factors that this policy suggests be reviewed when it comes to a non-market lease. So reduced from the 100% market rate. And those criteria would be, what's the public benefit? Does the community have access? Is there actually a community need? Does their service fill a gap or provide different opportunities to the public? Is there competition? In the case of the thrift store, no, there's no other thrift store. What residents might expect the village to support, and then other benefits to local residents. So when a lease is up for negotiation or a new lease is presented, staff would look at these criteria, provide a score, and based on that, it might indicate whether council should consider a market rent because they didn't check a lot of those boxes, or at the other end, they've checked them all, they have a really high score, and so a nominal rent of $1 might make sense. And then, of course, council might settle on something somewhere in between. There's a process flow chart provided in the presentation outlining the steps that staff would go through, gathering information, determining if it would be a market or non-market lease, and then summarizing the terms and providing it to council for a decision on where the rate might stand. Staff also anticipate there would be a number of questions from council, the public, as well as our tenants. And so that's provided in this presentation. And perhaps I'll turn it over to council and they can ask questions. And with any luck, we already have some answers prepared.
Are there any questions that you have for CAO Baker at this time. Councillor Brown.
On this last slide, the public benefit evaluation, it says residents may expect village to support this service. And I'm wondering who will determine that and how?
Through the chair, all of these are somewhat subjective. Staff need to use their experience and expertise to determine, is this, you know, in the case of, let's say, an arena, it's often the public expects the municipality to participate in the delivery of that service in some way. Whereas if it was for a bowling alley, in the village of Kaslo's context anyway, it might not be as expected that the village would support that bowling alley. Maybe in the 50s and 60s, but today's day and age, no. So that might be an example of where that subjectivism comes in. But notwithstanding whatever staff come up with as some preliminary scoring on this criteria, it's council's ultimately decision on how you score it. And each council member could score it differently and come up with a different final number. And so it's not up to staff to make any type of decision. Simply make a recommendation, gather the information, and then council decides. And I should go one step further and say, even if council collectively decides that, you know, it's a score of 30 out of 30, that doesn't bind you to providing a nominal rent. You could still choose to charge them market rent or somewhere in between. Simply a guideline.
And I'm assuming that at this point, we're just talking about the non-market ones, because I'll tell you my perception is that if it's a commercial entity that's renting from us, it should be based upon other commercial rents that are charged in the area, so that we're not competing with somebody who's trying to make a living out of renting their spaces. That's my personal opinion anyhow, but that council, you know, what would be up to council to decide, but I don't think that we should be subsidizing a commercial renter.
Do you mind if I add some clarity there?
Yes.
So further to your comment, council is prohibited from providing assistance to business. It's illegal or contrary to the community charter. So you have to charge market rates to business. And so there might be questions of how do you determine market rates? Well, there's various different ways, but yeah.
So the reference to market leases is simply as a comparator, that we could use that as basis for one of the non-market ones or one of the not-for-profits or other organizations if we choose.
True. And then,
okay.
Absolutely. And further to that, tenants of the Campbell Memorial Center might be charged market rates.
Other question? Councillor Bird, go ahead.
Thanks. Through the chair, I have a question to staff. Could you give us if it's a relatively short list, could you list off the leases that are going to be negotiated in the next couple of years? Who are we talking about exactly?
I'd have to look it up. So if council wants to bear with me, I can look up and try to find a list of our leases.
We're waiting for staff. Did either of you have any other questions?
I guess just.
Councillor Brown?
Through the chair, just a clarification, like when I go through this doesn't set any numbers. It really just sets the structure of how things would be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's how I interpret it as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Harry, it doesn't look like I have easy access to our list of
Okay.
leases.
You know, that several years ago, we had set a policy that whatever the leases were, that they would go up by, I think it was either 2 or 3%. So basically cost of living for each of them, regardless of what the rate was. Just so that we were keeping up with, you know, trying to keep up with the increasing costs. There's some, yeah, it's good information in there for tenants regarding insurances and that kind of thing, so. So the goal tonight is for us to set that, or
Hopefully to consider adopting the policy.
right. So it's not, we're not actually setting rates for anybody at this point, just that how the determination of those rates, what it'll be based upon. And it would still be on a case by case basis then as to whether they're one of the 5 types or 6 types of leases.
Correct.
Okay. So we're not setting it for each of them, but just what the different structures could be or would be. So if there is no problem with the actual document, we could move forward with the recommendation. And knowing that they could be, each of the leases would be varied depending upon the matrix that's used and how we and staff assesses them, with the ultimate decision always at the will of council of the day. The recommendation is that the lease of village land and buildings policy be adopted. So I'll read that out. If anyone wishes to move that. Moved by Councillor Lang. Second by Councillor Bird. Any further discussion? All those in favor? It's carried. The next item is public communications regarding the RV park agreement. Staff has provided a report. Did you want to speak to that at all, CEO Baker?
Certainly. Thank you, Mary Hewitt. So perhaps what I'll do is just provide context. So staff have received a number of correspondence from the public asking various questions about the purchase and sale agreement. And often their questions have some misunderstanding or misrepresentation of various sorts. And so it's quite time consuming to respond to these questions because it's not simply a matter of yes or no. It's having to untangle where their root misunderstanding started from, which leads to other questions that they have. And so given the capacity that staff currently have, we're looking for direction on ultimately how much time does council want staff to spend answering individual questions from the public, or would it like to take a more comprehensive look and have a small communication strategy related to the agreement? Options are provided in the staff report, including a report that takes in all of the questions we've received and provide that to council, or a committee of the whole workshop style meeting in which the public can come and ask their questions and council can answer their questions. It's also an option for a public information session, which is a bit more free flowing than a committee of the whole, where staff might provide an overview of the purchase and sale agreement that could resolve quite a few of the misunderstandings collectively for a group of people, and then open it up to questions from the public. Another option could be that there's a frequently asked questions document produced, similar to what was done for the RV park agreement in 2025. I believe it was called For the Record. So we answered questions collectively. And the intent here is to try to avoid getting into time-consuming one-on-one conversations by email or phone or in person with the public, trying to do something collectively. I know that council's heard feedback from the public that they'd like to hear other people's questions. And so some of these options provide an opportunity for that. It's not just their own, but they get to hear what else is going on in the minds of the public. And then, of course, there's always the option to do nothing at this time, and staff will unfortunately have very limited capacity to respond to the public's individual questions, but could make an effort.
Right. Are there any questions? Councillor Brown?
Through the chair, I have not so many questions as much as comments on this. When I look at these options presented, the option C, organize a public information session to provide an overview and receive questions, seems like the best to me in terms of being able to actually answer all the questions so that we aren't then followed up with more emails with questions. Were we to just prepare a report explaining the agreement, if it didn't include questions people might still have, we would continue to receive that volume. Were we to hold a committee of the whole, I feel like when we had that one meeting at St. Andrews, people felt really heard. They had an opportunity to speak. We had an opportunity to have more of a free-flowing conversation. And I feel like we walked away with that, with both sides feeling really good. So I would feel like that public information session where people had an opportunity to ask questions and staff were there in at one time to be able to answer all those questions instead of as they show up in his email, it would provide a meaningful opportunity. I think that this is a really big topic in our community, and ensuring that we stay transparent and ensuring that we stay communicative with the public through this process, despite the workload, is going to be a really important aspect to trust and transparency through this. And so I would be comfortable moving C to organize a public information session to provide an overview and receive questions. The original actually also had that staff attended, so staff would be the one that would be answering those questions and leading that session. Then that would be the option I think that I would like to move.
Well, I'm going to entertain some input from other councillors before I take your motion, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Okay. Is there anyone else wants to offer comment first? Oh, sorry, I did see you, Councillor Bird, earlier. Go ahead.
Through the chair, I think Councillor Matt is right in that was an effective the public information session that we had did feel effective both to council and the public. I also think, although it might be it's not a bad way at all, the written communication on the website of frequently asked questions. But in fact, I find that it would probably take more staff time to do that properly than to have a public information session that could be recorded and put up there for those people who couldn't attend, than to try to make a really good frequently asked questions document, because you can never quite answer a question in writing to make that answer. Like, it can be more effectively done in a personal way that you could do in that kind of a format of a public information session. So I would support that recommendation from Councillor Brown.
Yeah, I'd like to speak in favor of the fourth recommendation of FAQs. And the reason is that it would become a living, breathing document. And a single session, information session, can only capture the information that's available up to that point. And we all know that there's many, many steps remaining before this deal becomes complete or wherever it's headed. So at least with an FAQ, you can, because it can be changed and altered from day to day, week to week, it makes it current. They'll have the current information But we can't hold a public meeting every time there's substantial changes to the agreement or wherever direction we're headed. So I'd like to see something on the website that addresses the most commonly asked questions and then as things change and people send in more requests for information, they can appear on that page.
Councillor Bird, Brown, sorry.
To the chair. I think that there's a lot of great sense in what you're saying and keeping that updated. I would be concerned that that might actually add burden to staff and keeping that constantly updated as we kind of go. But I do see a lot of value in it. I feel like a public information session would get a lot of the information that is misinformation out there and a lot of the questions that need to be asked and answered out there, and then perhaps to follow that up with a FAQ that people could reference from that point forward, where they would all know where to go and get that information where they need it. I guess my concern with only an FAQ is that certain people's questions and thoughts might be left out and they'd have no recourse to have that done because the FAQ might not address that concern. Whereas that public information session would allow time for understanding to be met, and questions and clarifying questions and all of the things that might come up. Sometimes just a document doesn't necessarily answer all questions, and sometimes, in fact, it creates more questions.
And did you have anything else, Councillor Bird, before I speak?
No.
Okay. I actually prefer the written just because it is more available to the greater range of people. It might not hit everybody, but neither would a public session because all rooms have a capacity and many people would not wish to attend a public meeting. We do know that there are some who will, but you can't hit everyone's schedules. But if you can have something that answers the questions that to date, and it is basically about the misunderstandings of it at this point with the agreement. The agreement has been before us since last August, and it hasn't materially changed. There's a misunderstanding, thinking that there have been changes, but it's gone through the two legal teams to make sure that we're meeting all of the requirements that we need to. So I actually prefer the written because it's accessible to more people. We could be excluding a lot of people in the public information session, is my view. Way more than you would exclude by those who might not want to, who might not get their questions answered. In the last one we took 4 hours, but I don't think that would be an appropriate timeline for this one. Because even if we are in a room together, if you have 50 people, we're not going to be able to answer every question from every person plus follow-up. I think we've got to be realistic in that. And we do have to be cognizant of, we've just seen the CAOs, it's fantastic having this in getting updated each month now, or each meeting with the progress on our projects. But that progress could be greatly slowed because I think CAO Baker is the only one who can answer these questions because he's the one who's been the constant through this process. So those are my feelings on it. So, Councillor Brown?
To the chair, would it be possible to do 2 of these things, or do we have to pick one of them? Because, I mean, honestly, like if we were to organize a public information session and cap it at a certain amount of time, I feel like it was incredibly, you're saying, it might miss people. But my lived experience was that there were a lot of people there who felt heard in a way that throughout this entire process, they haven't felt heard. So to merely offer a FAQ is going to leave people who feel marginalized even more marginalized. Whereas were we to offer that public information session for the people who really feel passionate that they need to be there to have their question heard or to hear the questions of their fellow community members, and then for the people who might not be able to or aren't comfortable in that format, then perhaps an FAQ is there as a supplementary document to be able to answer additional questions or summarize what was said at that meeting so that it isn't kind of answering over and over again. But I feel like just developing an FAQ and then not answering emails around it anymore is woefully inadequate.
Councillor Bird?
Through the chair. I don't think it's terribly difficult these days to get a really good summary of a presentation that's on video. And then you can go over it over the I'm sorry to say this, AI summary, and then make sure it's correct. That becomes your FAQ. So the video goes on the website, the questions summarized, and both the questions and the answers summarized. And then as Councillor Lang has suggested, over time there will be other major questions that will come in, and those can just be added. You know, we'll stick with a one public session, summarize it, it becomes the document, and it becomes a living document, and that later on more questions will be added. I think that's quite doable.
So, but then what I'm hearing is that you want it, so then it would have to be held in a place that a video capture is possible. Because we don't have a traveling roadshow that we could do. It would have to be in this room, which severely limits the capacity. Well, I guess there's online we could do. And I'm not sure what CAO Baker's time looks like in the coming weeks to be able to put together two different things and continue with the workload, and with what the public or yourselves as council feel is a reasonable timeline for this to occur, because it won't happen next week. It could be a few weeks, and not knowing what CAO has that's urgent on his schedule at this point. So I don't know whether you had a timeline in mind, and actually it disturbed me hearing about about how entertaining having, well, people can always write, but the idea behind this is that staff isn't going to have to respond, take the time to untangle the questions in each and every email that is submitted. Otherwise, if that's the intent, then it's really, this is not doing anything. It's just making additional work for the CAO. If the intent is to still have them respond to each and every email that is being submitted by members of the public. We're trying to ease the workload while still giving the public what they want. So, CAO Baker, if there's two different things that have been proposed, and one of them is, well, three different things. One is just the FAQ, one the public information session, and the other one is a combination of both. Just thinking about your capacity in the immediate future.
No, Mayor Hewitt, it's a tough one because the more time that staff spend on the RV park agreement, the less time we have to spend on council's numerous other strategic priorities, resolutions, objectives and measures, and the CAO mandate. There's already been quite an increase in the amount of administration that staff need to do with respect to the CAO mandate. So a timeline for a public information session, it's, yeah, and vacations for the summer in there. So maybe end of July or into August. Might make sense if council decides to pursue a public information session to ask for questions ahead of time so that they can be
Yeah.
Reviewed and summarized. Council could also, choose to defer this in some way. Maybe another option is that we ask the public for their questions. Open it up here for the next 3 weeks. Develop a frequently asked questions document that hopefully answers those questions and clears up a bunch of misconceptions. And then council revisit the idea at its July 14th meeting of whether a public information session is still necessary. So not to confuse the matter more, but perhaps we get out to the public as quickly as we can, a frequently asked questions document, and then council reassess.
Well, I think it has to be stated for clarity that we're not looking at for input or additional changes to the items that are in the purchase and sale agreement, because that agreement has been signed, and that is what the developer is working with. So it's just providing clarity on where they think that there was changes. So perhaps there isn't as much that needs to go into this as we may think, because we're not going to look at all 19 of them again and say, I want this to change. It'll just be providing clarity on, what was perceived to be different or looks to be different between the agreement looked at last August and the one that was signed, because that seems to be where the problem has occurred, is people think that they're different. So the options for, the number of things that it could be, I think, hopefully are reduced, because we're not talking about everything under the sun, because most of them haven't changed. There were a few items at this point that have been pinpointed.
There you go. Just to try to think of it from the public perspective, if there is another public information session, it's possible that it creates confusion for the public in thinking that the village is looking for input, because the village council was looking for input when it held its last public information session. And so holding another one could cause confusion. Just want council to be aware of the unintended consequences.
Councillor Brown.
To the chair. I feel that if there was, at the beginning of the conversation, at the beginning of the advertising of this public information session, a clear understanding that the terms are set and signed, and that this is merely an opportunity for clarifying questions and to understand things that might come next or of the agreement or from the agreement, not to change what is in the agreement. That would set the expectations of community members to understand what this was about, so that there wasn't that confusion. If we can anticipate confusion, or we can anticipate something like that, then we have the opportunity to get out ahead of it and do something about it.
My other comment would be, as the developer works through each of the conditions and the village works through, there's 19 of them. Are we going to do this after each one of those reports hits our table and gets placed on the website for people to review? We've got to be forward thinking. I don't know, we have no idea where the developer is in working through the conditions. We know we have a few, but we've got to set for ourselves realistic expectations. We're not trying to hide anything from the public, but we do have to be mindful of the amount of time that it is taking from the priorities that are set.
Years.
All right. So at this point, I guess it will take a motion and debate the motion. Councillor Brown.
To the chair, I would like to move that we organize a public information session to provide an overview and receive questions from the public.
Right. There appears to be no seconder for that motion. Is there another motion that a member of council would like to propose? Councillor Bird.
Through the chair, yes, I'd like to move that written communication be developed and put on the website in response to questions already asked, and that council assesses sometime in early July, perhaps, if a public information is still something that we feel would clear the air.
Got it.
Get that. Okay. Do we have a second for that motion? I'll second it for discussion. So if we can have that read back, it's basically option D. And there's always the option of doing something in the future, but you're just wanting to embed that in the motion that we will bring it back at either the July or the August motion to retain the option, which we always have the option to do something further. But that's the change you're wanting to option D, is to assess the need for the public information session?
Yes.
Go ahead, Councillor Brown.
Through the chair. My main concern with this, we're looking at if we were to try to start an information session now, perhaps July or August. If we decide in July that we would like to have that public information session, we're basically pushing it to the election, right? And so that feels like the transparency that we're looking for might not be able to be provided except for at the ballot box. And my other concern is that it seems like this is going to put a lot of work on staff to have to keep updating the FAQ as we get emails. My understanding is that he doesn't want to have to answer each one of these emails and have to continually answer the questions that are coming in. There's just not enough time. And to create this FAQ and then continually keep this living document that's going, I love that. But, like as an ancillary to a public information session, but it does seem awfully staff intensive in terms of work. More intensive perhaps than just one public information session. And to address the mayor's question, if there's 19 different times, are we supposed to have 19 public information sessions? No, I don't believe we should. But anytime that there's material that's been changed and the integrity of the process is being called into question, then I think that we should, as a council, discuss that. In this scenario, things have been changed. So there is an understanding why we would want to look into that or talk about that. And should we get to 19 other, if I don't anticipate there should be those, but were there to be, then yeah, I would think that in the interest of transparency and the public, trust, that we'll look into any discrepancies to ensure that this process is faithfully being undertaken.
Councillor Bird.
Through the chair, and I'll be quick. I don't disagree with anything you're saying there, Councillor Brown. And in fact, I would have supported the motion of having a public information session, except for that the CAO seemed to indicate that it would be less onerous on staff to do the FAQ and wait, and perhaps we can reassess of whether a public information is needed. So I'm totally in favor of a public information session, but if it comes to a question of staff timing and staff has told us it would be less onerous to start off with an FAQ, then I'm I'll take that. I'll take that at his word.
Okay, do you have any input?
Yeah, through the chair, yeah, I support Councilor Bird's position.
Right. Is there any further discussion on the motion before us? Okay, so I'll call the question. Does anyone need it read back? Okay, so all those in favor? And opposed? Negative vote recorded?
Yes, please.
Okay, that motion passes. Next item is 9.4, new operator at the Kaslo Municipal Campground. Dale Baker has a presentation for us, sir.
Thank you, Mayor Hewitt. One moment while I bring up the presentation. Okay, so what staff have provided to council is a staff report outlining all of the good work that's happened at the campground over the last 22 years and the situation we're currently in, where we've had a long-time operator, and they've indicated that they will retire from campground operations at the end of the 2027 camping season. And so council is in a position where it has a choice to make. Do we ultimately continue with a contract operator, or do we look at a different type of operations, perhaps bringing it in-house is one of the options of the staff report. And so the presentation I'm going to go through very quickly here is just an overview of what the last 22 years have looked like for the campground. $1.78 million in total revenue, whereby the village has received about $500,000 as its 30% share, and the other $1.24 million has been held by the operator, minus expenses from that 1.24 million. So not to give anyone the impression that that's what they have taken home and enjoyed. They have numerous expenses they've had as part of operations. And through this slide, you can see that there's been a steady increase in revenue, total revenue, as well as the revenue being received by the village. In the beginning, it would have been sub $5,000. Most recently, I believe we exceeded $40,000 in annual revenue. For interest's sake, we have a pattern. We can see that July and certainly August are our peak seasons, but slowly ramping up in May and June, and then still active all the way into October. Highest year for revenue would be $153,000 roughly. That occurred in 2025. And the lowest year would have been all the way at the beginning in 2003, when there was about $100,000 in revenue realized. So campground revenue has obviously increased significantly, over 750% since the village has made it available since 2003. Our revenue has obviously gone up and peaked. And notwithstanding the dip that we saw through COVID, it's recovered quite strongly. And if there was an operator that was interested in taking it over, I think they'd take a look at these numbers and realize there's certainly a really good opportunity here in Kaslo to continue operating. There are benefits to using a contract operator. One would be the village ultimately enjoys the revenue it receives, over $40,000 last year, and it doesn't have a significant investment in operations and maintenance, managing staff or employees, or contractors. Our participation is fairly limited, and yet we enjoy a decent share of the profits. And so certainly it would be nice to bring it in-house, but the thought of having additional staff and they call in sick and we need to find different janitors. What if our operator is unavailable? Can become quite a headache. And so if council wants to move in that direction where we bring this in-house, then staff would need to come back and outline all of the pros and cons and options for council. What we're looking for at this point is just an indication. Should we continue using a contract operator, or should staff come back with a proposal to bring it in-house? I have it back to council.
Councillor Lang.
Yeah. There's a chair and as a former campground operator, or at least my wife was. It's a 24/7 job. You can be expect to be called up in the middle of the night, and it's just a real commitment. And any other way of dealing with it aside from a contractor would be ludicrous. It's obviously you got to pick the right contractor, and because they're representing the village, greeting tourists and making them welcome to our community. And so that's certainly a key factor when you're evaluating the proponents, but it's just it's a big commitment. So the money sounds good, but you're gonna earn it.
Right.
So that's my 2 cents.
Thank you, Councillor Lang. Anyone else? So I would say that the recommendation would be that we would continue with the campground operations being operated as on a contract basis.
There is a recommendation embedded in the agenda.
Oh, okay.
If you wanted some words.
Okay. Okay, there we go. Flipping between screens. So that staff develop a competitive procurement process for a new campground operator agreement beginning in 2028. Moved by Councillor Lang, seconded by Councillor Brown. Any further discussion? Councillor Bird.
Through the chair, just the language, is staff developing a competitive procurement process in 2028, or it's just the way it's
Okay, which would begin in
like
2028?
yeah, friendly amendment would be for a new campground operator agreement to begin in
2028?
yeah.
Just cut out beginning in 2028 if you're confused. I mean, staff
Yeah.
are gonna know what this means, so.
Okay. Okay, that would be my friendly amendment to that one, is to remove that year, just that staff develop a competitive procurement process for a new campground operator agreement.
Are the mover and seconder okay with that friendly amendment? Okay. Okay, any further discussion? All those in favor? That is carried. Then we'll move into other business. We have correspondence for action, which was brought forward by Councillor Brown, sorry. And there's a motion in there.
Read it for you if you like.
Yeah, I'm just, because it's not in the agenda itself, it's in the report, so. Okay, so the recommendation is that the correspondence from Ann Malik dated May 27, 2026 be referred to staff for review and report back to council. Are you moving that then, Councillor Brown?
Oh, yeah, I thought that when I,
No, I was just reading, I usually read the recommendation
oh, okay.
and.
Yes, so moved.
Okay. All right. Seconder for that motion, seconded by Councillor Bird. Discussion? All those in favor? And opposed? That motion is carried. And then we have the motion served from the last meeting by Councillor Bird that staff provide a report on implementation of the recommendations made in the 2024 Community Wildfire Resiliency Plan. Did you wish to move that, Councillor Bird? And second, Councillor Brown. Discussion? All those in favor? Motion is carried. And information items, there was no correspondence for information, but there is a report, which is the draft of the annual municipal report. For information, does anyone have questions for CAO Baker on that before I move into public input?
No discussion on information items.
Oh. Thank you. All right. So then that brings us to public input, verbal submissions, public input at the end. So we will now open the second public input period. Speakers may address council only on items of business appearing on tonight's agenda. This period is limited to 10 minutes. When I call your name, you will have the opportunity to provide your input. Please begin by stating your name and place of residence. You will have up to 2 minutes to speak. After all speakers have provided their input, council members will have an opportunity to ask brief clarifying questions through the chair. Council will not engage in debate, and if the speaker's input relates to operational issues, staff will be happy to assist them during regular business hours. Do we have any questions from the public? Anyone online, if you could use the raise hand function. Seeing any, no questions? All right, well, thank you all for joining us at our meeting this evening. Motion to adjourn the meeting by Councillor Brown. All those in favor? Motion is carried. It must be late for you there, Councillor Bird.
It's 11:33.
Thanks for hanging in there.
My pleasure.
Yeah, and Councillor Leafwood wasn't where she could get internet service.
Mm.
So that's why she wasn't here tonight. She's away as well.
Yeah, I didn't calculate how dark it's going to be because I'm way in the country and I've got to walk to my brother's house. So hope the beavers don't get me.
All right, have a good night.
Yeah, you too. Thank you.
Bye. Yeah, are we muted?